One of the Colts' only offseason moves is now coming back to bite them in the rear end in a pretty significant way. We're going to cover all that and more and talk about Anthony Richardson's analytics, what we're seeing, what to be hopeful of as we look forward to now Game 8 with our starting quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts. What's going on? It's Elijah from Sports Talk Indy, where we cover all things Colts every single day. And if you're new to the community, be sure to like and subscribe and become a part of this community as we continue to cover the Indianapolis Colts as they are now gaining momentum into Week 4 going against the Pittsburgh Steelers, which is going to be a pretty key matchup. It's going to be a pretty heavy one. The Steelers have allowed less than they're averaging 8.6 points per game this season, which is that's not going to be an easy thing to run or pass against this season or this game coming up. But let's talk about this. What is the move that we're hinting at here? That is the signing of quarterback Joe Flacco. And you might be wondering, how is a guy who has literally the lowest amount of snaps played on the season for any Colts player biting them in the butt? And I'll tell you this. The reason is because there are already a significant amount of people that have abandoned Anthony Richardson. And I want you to see this. I want you to know this. If you are one of the people who are already abandoning Anthony Richardson, that's fine. That's fine. It's totally okay. But don't come back and act like you were all on board with this prospect of a quarterback when things turn around. Because I don't think things are as bad as they look. In fact, I don't think things are bad at all. Specifically, I mean, the Colts were still able to find a way to win. But I think that people are looking at the games last year that Joe Flacco played and looking at him to be this all-encompassing savior for the Indianapolis Colts. Let's not forget about the 4 years before, of which Joe Flacco had a 57% completion percentage, a 55% completion percentage, where he played games for the Broncos, the Jets, and then Cleveland, where he played only 5 games, only attempted 204 passes, and only threw for 1,600 yards. And while that might sound great when you're talking about where the Indianapolis Colts are now with their current QB situation, I don't think that Joe Flacco is the answer to take this team from being a potential not winning a lot of games to a Super Bowl contender. I don't even think Joe Flacco is a better quarterback than Anthony Richardson. And here's why. Because I don't think Joe Flacco can do many of the things that Anthony Richardson can do. When you're talking about the issues with Anthony Richardson, you're talking about calibration issues. You're talking about the nuances, about the instrumentals of his throwing motion. And a lot of them have already been fixed since college. And maybe you haven't noticed, maybe you have, but one of the key things that was brought up about Anthony Richardson coming out of college was his footwork. He was not getting his feet wide enough when throwing the football, and that was allowing for some errant throws. But now what we're seeing is Anthony Richardson immediately come in, spread his feet, and be able to do way more and get way more power behind his throws. Now, the key thing for Anthony Richardson coming up is the ability to balance that, right? When to throw a little bit more touch on, when to really bullet that pass in there, and also to be able to understand the playbook and the coverages. Because the issue that the teams are giving Anthony Richardson is nothing new. Teams are throwing Anthony Richardson the highest amount of zone coverage of any quarterback in the NFL right now. They are facing him with disguised looks, which for a guy who, again, has only played 20 games since high school. Not 20 NFL games, 20 games since high school. That is NFL, that is college combined. He has 20 starts under his belt. So when you're throwing disguised looks, of course you're going to get a guy who doesn't have a lot of experience really struggle. And you're seeing a lot of NFL quarterbacks come to the aid of Anthony Richardson and say, it's not his, it's an experience thing. But a lot of the mechanics that you're seeing Anthony Richardson bring out are not unfixable things. They're not things that can't be adjusted, can't be tweaked, can't be moved. These are things that a lot of quarterbacks deal with. But we're seeing, and Alex Smith brought this up yesterday, the Peyton Manning effect, right? We expect quarterbacks to be able to come in and immediately start. And for some people, it works great. You get guys like Joe Burrow. You get guys like C.J. Stroud who just come into the league and immediately are starting caliber quarterbacks. But don't be surprised when some of those guys have fall-off years. Joe Burrow obviously only played 8 games in his first season and then had one of the most gruesome knee injuries we've ever seen. There are a lot of guys who come in and are immediately dominant, but there are also 10 times more guys who come in and need adjustment. The Colts, we sat through Scotty Tolzien. We sat through Brian Hoyer. We sat through Jacoby Brissett. We sat through Phillip Rivers, Matt Ryan, Carson Wentz. The list goes on and on and on of quarterbacks the Indianapolis Colts have had to deal with, not even since Andrew Luck retired, but since Peyton Manning left Indianapolis. Because don't forget, there was a whole season that we rocked with Curtis Painter and Dan Orlovsky, and then went to Andrew Luck, and then Andrew Luck got hurt. So there was a lot of quarterback movement in the past 15 years for the Indianapolis Colts. And I think that it's very easy to think that the answer was just going to get fixed because we drafted a top 5 quarterback for the first time in 12 years since Andrew Luck was drafted in 2012. But the answer isn't that simple, because defense is an extremely difficult position. And not only for Anthony Richardson, but we're seeing guys all around the league struggle with defense this year. Passing is down. It is the lowest it has been in almost 20 years. Field goals are up. Rushing is up. Rushing defense is down, but passing defense has never been higher. You're seeing guys like Patrick Mahomes already have 5 interceptions. You're seeing guys like Sam Darnold suddenly come out and look like the best quarterback in the league. The NFL season is already drunk. It's already crazy. But the analytics don't lie here, because this is what we're looking at from Anthony Richardson. And yes, it doesn't, like, the box office or the box score doesn't look great. But the 2 things that Anthony Richardson needed to improve on coming out of last season, coming into this season, was his completion and his ability to stick with plays and not abandon the pass. Because last year we saw him abandon the pass on, I believe it was close to 60% of plays. And we're seeing him stick with it a lot more. But not only that, but he's able to make very quick throws. He's making reads very, very quickly. And some of them are great and some of them are not. Some of them are disguised looks, again, very difficult for anyone to see, but let alone a 22-year-old quarterback who has only 20 games under his belt. And I do believe that if anyone can turn this around and really help Anthony Richardson's development, it's going to be Shane Steichen. But don't look at this as Colts fans and say that immediately Anthony Richardson was going to be the answer. No one thought that, which is why he fell to 4, which sounds like he fell to 4. But there's a reason that a lot of people said this was a risky pick. Chris Ballard is not generally a gambling man, but this was a gamble of a pick. But there wasn't a lot of other options. It was Will Levis was the other option. And honestly, looking at what Tennessee's dealing with, I don't know that that's a better option, considering the fact that they gave him 3 all-pro wide receivers, and yet he's still having a hard time winning football games and making good decisions. So this isn't just an Anthony Richardson thing. Though for us Colts fans, it's very easy to put our blinders on and only look at Anthony Richardson. But it's a guy not only who has the ability to grow and the ability to learn from this, but he's a guy who already has accountability. I mean, you saw the video last night on Twitter of which they were talking about the endgame speech. And he said, "Defense, you carried us." He like shouted at everyone else. And then fighting back tears, literally almost crying, he says, I need to do better. I need to do better. And then from the locker room erupts and cheers, and one guy says, "We got you, bro." That is the kind of culture and attitude that we as fans need to also extend towards Anthony Richardson, because it's very easy for us to put blinders on and to look at other quarterbacks around the league, to look at the Patrick Mahomes, to look at the CJ Strouds, to look at the other quarterbacks and assume that we understand exactly what went into that. Coaching has so much to do with it. And when you don't know your quarterback yet, you don't know how to play call for him. But I think this is a learning experience, a growing experience. No quarterback actually has a better completion percentage of over 30 yards. And that's something that we've talked about. Anthony Richardson's great at the home run, but not as good in the singles and doubles. And I think we saw a little bit of an improvement in some of those this weekend. His accuracy continues to be a problem, but despite that, the receivers gave him good yardage after the catch. 29th, 3rd yard after catch, and 3rd after the above expectants. Without accuracy, those are really just fluke results biased by a few very successful throws. Don't expect that to continue. Despite a 50% completion rate, he posted great yards per attempt. And then his abandoned rate was a little higher than average, but was compromised of primarily throwaways and scrambles instead of sacks, which is exactly what you want to see. And that's another thing that Anthony Richardson brings to the table. He doesn't get sacked. Beyond like what Lamar Jackson's able to do, Anthony Richardson has the ability to understand when a play is over and give up on the play. Now, he's had a couple of really bad times where it's like where he had the forward motion play there early on in the game yesterday. of which could have been an interception where he was just trying to extend the play. But you see things like that, and that's something that you don't expect a lot of guys to have, especially this young. But this guy's got accountability. And I do believe that if the Indianapolis Colts coaching staff is able to continue to work with this guy, I think he's so moldable. I think he's so teachable, and this is going to be something that's going to be incredible to watch, the Anthony Richardson experience. But for now, don't be chanting Joe Flacco. He's not the answer. We don't need another Band-Aid, and I don't think Joe Flacco is the Band-Aid. Again, let's bring up the last 4 years of stats to see that he has his career completion percentage is 60. But his last 4 or 5 years, 55, 57, 60, I mean, it's not great. So let's not look at Joe Flacco to be the above-all answer, and stick with the ride, hold on to the hope that we have in Anthony Richardson, and continue to move forward and look towards next week against the Pittsburgh Steelers and the next week against the Tennessee Titans as we continue on to the season now with finally a notch in the win column.